We are talking a lot about data, and you can't finish talking about data today without data protection. Your most critical asset, we heard about generative AI, we learned about a lot of things today. But I'll bring in the perspective of how do you secure your data, especially in today's hybrid world. I think we would all agree that today we have a lot of silos within our organization, especially with cloud coming in, multi-cloud era. As it is, we had silos. We had multiple hypervisors, multiple apps, data in bits and pieces all across. Getting a unified view of data is almost impossible in today's world, given the amount of complexity we have. We used to have it within our data center. Now we have multiple real estates, and for good reasons. We choose to have different clouds. But that said, how do we ensure that we have our data protected wherever it is? And how do we ensure that, especially in today's cybersecurity environment, given ransomware and given all these challenges we have, how do we make sure that in spite of all that, we are able to recover and run the business? So this business has become very hot now, especially post the 2019-20 post-COVID and the amount of cyber crimes which are on the rise. The only way for you to recover from a ransomware situation, assume it's happened, is to get your last night's copy of data. And who produces that last night's copy of data? The data protection vendor. So very clearly, Commvault being a leader on this side, we've been working on how do we ensure that you get that data back quickly and get your business up and running as soon as possible. So these are my pre-COVID slides. Used to be about talking about data growth and complexity and all that, but these days we talk more on ransomware protection and how do we recover in that scenario. If you look at most data protection vendors, they've been focused on the third piece, which is the recovery piece, and how do we recover, because this is the most critical thing. Pre-COVID, we were all worried about backup windows. How long do we take to backup? It's taking 48 hours, 72 hours. Can it be done in 8 hours? Nobody was worried about how do we recover, how do we restore, etc. In fact, recovery or restore testing was not almost not done at all. Whereas post the COVID scenario and the ransomware scenario now, I see a lot of customers wanting to test, wanting to know whether they can recover in 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, etc., which is a very good thing. But along with that, we also have challenges of when we recover, how do we know that we have a good copy of data with us to recover? How do we know that that copy is not malware infected? How do we know whether it's a clean copy of data from which we are recovering? These are typical challenges which customers face in today's world, lots of questions on that side. But that said, as a data protection vendor, we took a step back and said, let's follow the NIST framework, given the fact that that is something which is commonly followed by the CISO community. We said, let's map our data protection offerings to the NIST framework. So we moved beyond the recover, and we said, let's look at how do we even identify, protect, and how do we secure and defend basically before we go to recover. So instead of just recovering from a situation, we said, can we stop ransomware? Can we tell you that there is a threat in your network, there is a challenge in your network, there is somebody sitting out there who's sniffing. So we started looking at different technologies out there, and we decided a deception technology coupled with backup or coupled with data protection would be a good answer to that question. So essentially what it means is we put a lot of decoys around the data protection space that you have, and these decoys are could be your app servers, could be your web servers, but essentially when threat actors get into your environment and start sniffing around, they look at these dummy decoys and they start playing around with them, and we integrate them with your SIEM, with your source. So you get alerts and you get a lot of telemetry on what's happening. Generally, the data protection environment usually is a few administrators, and usually it's not many people who have access to this. So obviously when you get alerts from this environment, you know something is happening, you know something is not right. So very clearly you will be able to get an alert from here which helps you figure things out. So this is an offensive way of doing it rather than just defending the situation. And recover as it is, we are doing a lot of things to recover. So if you look at a product that does this, we call it ThreatWise. We bought an Israeli security company, integrated that into our offerings so that When you take a backup itself, it asks you whether you want to deploy a decoy of a database. If you're taking a backup of an app server, it will ask you, do you want to deploy a decoy of the app server? You say yes, it automatically goes and deploys one. And unlike the honeypots of the past, this one is you can deploy many of these. You can almost put a net of decoys. Because the problem with honeypots in the past was you have one of those, the chances of the cyber criminal getting to the honeypot was a little remote. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, hit and miss. But this one is like many of them. A single server can kind of emulate almost 200, 225 decoys. So essentially means that the chances of somebody interacting with one of these and you getting a telemetry and an alert is extremely high. So this is about how do we go on the offensive. Second area, which is also very closely, tightly integrated, is the risk analysis. Generally, one of the risks that you carry is your critical data, say your IP or your financial services or your financial results, has access to too many people. If you're a public company, definitely you want to limit the access before you declare the results. So a lot of this proprietary or confidential information within an organization has excessive access to people. So this tells you that you have this kind of access, it shouldn't be there, and how do you kind of limit that access. Secondly, data classification. Especially with the new law that is being passed, you will need to classify your data, maintain the data in a certain way, etc. So today, given the proliferation of data and multiple silos it exists in, how do you even know where your PII data is? This will tell you where your PII data is. You will be able to classify that. And I saw Venkat presenting data from birth to cradle to grave kind of situation. So you can actually classify your data. So that data which you have not used for the last 5 years, 7 years, untouched data, dark data, it can be classified into lower cost storage or deleted. In most cases, we are not deleting data, but it's about time we start deleting data too, because your liability is high if you store the data beyond your retention period. But if your retention period is 8 years and 9th year data you deleted, and if there was a litigation, you're safe. You can tell the court that I've deleted and as per the law that is acceptable. So a lot of these things or the decision making can be got out of this risk analysis module for that piece. We also introduce a full-fledged malware scanning into our data protection technology. Most data protection vendors would do entropy scans or would check if the bits and bytes have changed, etc., etc. We went that step ahead and we did this because we were seeing that the backup copies could get infected. Your second copy could also get infected. How do you know that on the day of reckoning, assuming you have ransomware and you have to recover on the same day, how do you know if that copy is safe? So this tells you whether the copy is malware infected or not. So using a little bit of AI and stuff like that, we are able to tell you what's the last known good copy. So once you know, because on that day, what happens, or I spent a year on cybersecurity before I came in here, and I was a 911 in Mandiant for a lot of customers who were affected by ransomware. On that day, I tell you, is a CEO calling 6-7 times a day. Some of you would have been through it. It's very difficult to put in any sane working into, especially when you're down with ransomware servers encrypted. You don't have access to your own data. So you should at that time have one clean copy, and you don't know what is a clean copy. So this will tell you this is a clean copy. Because as it is to recover that copy will take hours, because you're restoring data which is fairly big. So the ability to restore that quickly and get clean data out of it and get your business back on track is extremely critical. That's when the rubber hits the road. And this will deliver at that moment. Also, we said, can we automate this whole thing? Almost like BCP DR. So you spend so much of money over the years on BCP DR, but unfortunately, if you have ransomware, both sides encrypted, it is not going to help you. So what is going to help you in that situation is a cyber resiliency DR. So basically, when a backup vendor like Commvault does the same thing, we would dedupe. When we say dedupe, we almost crunch the data down to 10% of what it is. We dedupe to the extent of 90%. So we have compression technologies and others that we use to just crunch the data down to a small form factor, and that is what is stored in the cloud or otherwise. And when it happens, we just get this data down for you as quickly as possible and get your business back on track. And we automate that process. This is the auto recovery. So we have automated that whole process of finding a clean copy, the last known good copy, identifying it, getting it quickly back, and getting your business back on track with automation. So these are things that we do on the cybersecurity side. And what we also did as innovation, as a leader in the last 4 years, is we also brought in SaaS into data protection. So we are probably the only company which is having a very mature SaaS offering in the data protection field worldwide. We called it Metallic. What Metallic does is it takes the headache of running data protection. This whole thing requires a bit of system integration. You have a master server, media server, make them talk to each other, maintain them, etc., etc. And skill sets today are a huge challenge. So SaaS is a great solution to solve all these problems. Like for example, if you're using Azure, just go to Azure, put your Microsoft secret key in there. It'll tell you these are your workloads. Just check those workloads and say backup. That's it. It backs up. You don't own anything. Servers are ours, the services are ours, everything is ours. You have a beautiful interface to interact with. It's a true SaaS solution. It works across clouds, whether it's AWS or GCP or OCI. We are the only ones on OCI, by the way. Doesn't matter if it is multi-cloud. We can move data between these different clouds. You can store backup of one on another, etc., etc. And we also back up stuff like O365 on Metallic, other than VMs and other critical workloads, SaaS applications, etc. It's very important that you back up your O365 and other Teams kind of applications, because almost 30% of the threats are emanating from that side today. So the collaboration applications are the ones which are very commonly exploited. I don't have that slide from IDC, but I saw one yesterday, and I'm just pulling up the data from there, that 30% of the cases that have been seen on ransomware came in from collaboration. And if you look at O365, for example, recovering O365 data is also a pain if you're using just native, which is what Microsoft offers you. If you use native, you won't have a point-in-time recovery. You have to recover the whole thing. So it doesn't help. Whereas if you use a data protection like Commvault there, what it does, it gives you, say, an email recovery or anything which is a point in time or a snapshot, which is just some particular thing that you want to recover rather than the whole thing. How does it help? At the time of ransomware or any security incident, it is easier to recover a point in time rather than go through the recovering the whole piece. So yeah, it supports databases, supports a lot of different things. But more importantly, if you have a multi-cloud environment, this works like magic, Azure or otherwise. Yeah. And also it's important that if you're using AWS, for example, and you're using native data protection on AWS, you will save a lot of money if you move to data protection there, because there is dedupe. What happens in AWS is you just store data as is. So they're all snapshots and not one. You'll have multiple of those. So I see most customers worried with rising storage costs on the cloud. Cloud is expensive. I hear all these things, and when I look at the storage, it's usually using a native snapshotting, and there are multiple copies stored. So we can make it very efficient. We can dedupe that and almost save you 50% on storage costs there. So the software, Commvault, will just pay for itself in the process of a TCO that you draw there and how you use it. So that is again a very critical thing if you're using AWS or Azure and using native rather than data protection. And the best part is not only you save 50%, we will also bring in a truckload of ransomware features into that where you're protected in the cloud with ransomware. Another point on ransomware which I would highly recommend that you do to safeguard your business is you have an air gap. So air gap is your last copy which is stored in a highly secure way. It's almost like in a vault. And how do I define that? I would say it's application air gap. There is only one process that touches that copy, which is a Commvault process for incremental backup. No other process touches that. And the second thing is it's network isolated, and the storage is also immutable. So this way that data is super protected, and with threat scanning that I spoke about, malware scanning, it ensures that even that one process, there is no malware that can slip through and go to that copy from that one process. So this is a very bulletproof way of protecting that last copy of data. Your first and second copy might have got infected, but your third copy will remain safe. And then we use the automation to get that back as soon as you want it, and in the quickest possible way. So we do it, for example, if I go back, we do it in Metallic. in Azure. We call it Metallic Reserve Recovery. So we have our own storage on Azure, which is the Metallic Reserve Recovery, where we have all these features for air gap. So you can just store one copy of your data on this MRR, as we say it, and when you want it, it's easily available. So again, what we have also done smartly is, while we have SaaS and we have software, we also see that unless you are a digital native, we see most customers using both. On the cloud side, you would want something like Metallic, where you don't own anything, it's just on the tap. On the on-prem, we still see all the workloads growing and customers saying that we need to run this, especially banks, or if you're a pharma company, you still have your on-prem. It's not, or you're on Exchange, for example, they're hardly on the cloud. So we see both workloads growing significantly. So we married the two of these. We brought them into a single console. So you don't have to worry how much of SaaS you're using for your cloud environment, how much of on-prem you're using for your physical environment. Commvault gives you a single interface for both of these. Not only that, we extended that single interface to endpoints, O365, SaaS applications, your Kubernetes applications, etc., etc. We also support the AIX and the AS400 of the world. And again, they come back to the same console. So there's just one console for Commvault. Again, what this gives you is, it gives you a single plane with which you can manage your data. It brings your data into a unified plane. From here, you can segregate, do your PII, you can do a lot of stuff. You can recover quickly when there is a ransomware situation. Imagine having 5 tools, 5 different silos, and you have a situation where you need to recover data quickly. It's almost impossible, it's disaster. So having a unified interface, a single tool all across, helping you recover both your endpoints as well as other critical data that you have, is the right strategy to go with. So again, we're trusted by many brands globally, even in India, some of the largest banks and telcos, and a lot of small and medium enterprises use Commvault. While we are a Gartner leader, there's a new Gartner report which is getting published, just published yesterday or day before. You will probably see it in a week's time in the Gartner. It's the critical capabilities report. So there are about 7 use cases that Gartner has documented in a very lengthy way for data protection, and you would find Commvault leading almost 6 of the 7 use cases there, rated number 1. So well accredited globally from a Gartner standpoint as well. And as I said, having a single interface, a single tool, it lowers risk, it lowers cost as well, makes it very cost effective, and of course you improve resilience, especially with the cyber resiliency DR that I spoke about. So thank you for a patient hearing. I'm around. If anybody wants to talk, we can talk offline. Thank you once again.